Today I thought of sharing with all of you how I mixed and mastered my drums for the latest drum cover that I have released of Metallica's Hardwired to Self-Destruct song. And the reason why is that drum cover has been getting some really good feedback. So take this as my biggest token of appreciation to you all as I share with you how the process goes into getting these very aggressive, very punchy, in your face drum sounds. So if you are an engineer or starting to learn engineering and want to know how these drum sounds are achieved, then I hope you really do find something very valuable throughout this run through. And if you just want to watch this for the sheer fun, that is also acceptable. It's totally up to you. So without further ado, let's not waste any more time and let's get right into the tutorial. Okay, so here we are in the workstation. And these are the drum tracks, and they are completely raw and dry. There's no processing done to it. I've actually have all the plugins turned off, but we're essentially starting from scratch. So right here I'm adding an EQ to the kick drum. I always start with the kick drum. The kick drum for me comes first. Here I have some high end added, an extra high end, a cut of the mid range, and a boost of some low end. Next here I have a compressor, and the compressor is boosting up the dynamics of the kick drum, giving it a much more fatter and much more aggressive tone to it. But really it's the EQ that is giving the kick drum its aggressive attack. And so that's what an EQ is. It is bringing up frequencies that you do want to cut through your mixes. Right here I have a noise gate, and what a noise gate is doing, it is opening and closing every time the kick drum is striked. So as you can see here, once the kick drum is striked and then afterwards it closes. This is used to eliminate cymbal bleed that is coming from the kick drum. We only want the kick drum to be coming out of the kick drum mic. So next I'm going to move to the snare. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add what is called a subtractive EQ. And a subtractive EQ is the process of eliminating unwanted frequencies. So here I'm going to scroll around the graph. Okay, that's a frequency right there that I do not like, so I'm going to get rid of that just by bringing down the band and then narrowing it down. So I've detected another unwanted frequency, so now I'm gonna look for that. And it's a much more higher tone. And what I'm doing really is I'm eliminating excess overtones and excess ringing. Okay, so there's the other one. Now I've got rid of that frequency. So here's a before and after. Now the snare drum sounds much more drier. So here I have another EQ that is doing the opposite. Now I'm adding frequencies that I do want. So here I have a boost of low end, I caught off some mid ranges, and a boost of some high end. The high end is giving the snare an extra crack to the snare. And of course, I have a compressor on the snare drum as well. Now for each individual microphone of each drum, I have a very slow attack and a very slow release. And the reason for that is I want the transients of the drums to peak out and cut through the mix really well. If I were to have a faster attack, then I would have a much more softer strike to the snare drum and the other drums, and I do not want that. So right here I have another noise gate on the snare. And now we can hear the drum kit coming together. But we're not done yet. There's still a lot more to go. This right here is the first rack tom, but really I have not used this rack tom at all, so there's nothing really going on with this. With the second floor tom, however, there is. So same thing, an EQ with a boost of some low end and scooping out the mid range, and boosting up the high ends to give the toms an aggressive snap. So as you can already tell, it's pretty much the same process with every individual drum, except for the overheads, which we'll be getting into later on. And right here I have my noise gate right here. The difference between this one though is I have my release settings set at a much more slower pace. Because the toms have a much more longer decay, I want the noise gate to close very slowly. Just to let the tom decay a lot more smoother, and so that it won't sound choppy. If I have the release set to a much more quicker setting, then the toms are going to sound very choppy, and I do not want that. I want them to strike with aggression, but also end with a nice flowing decay. So the release is essentially the amount of rate, or how quickly you want the noise gate to close. Next we're moving on to the overheads. And with the overheads I just simply have a compression and some EQ. The difference with these compressors on the overheads is that I have a much more faster attack. And really because the attack is coming from the snare microphone, and the overheads are capturing the overall tone of the drum set. And so I've also put some EQ on both overheads, and I only just put very little extra crispiness to the cymbals. I put a little bit of high end on both of them, just to brighten up the cymbals a little bit more. Give it some extra crisp. I don't want to add too much, because the cymbals themselves are already bright enough, but a little bit of extra doesn't hurt. Now you can hear we have a completely different sounding drum kit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm now in the mastering process. So I am routing each individual track into one single auxiliary track. And with the auxiliary track, I have full control of the entire drum kit. So with this one fader, I can pretty much bring down the entire drum kit. I no longer have to worry about highlighting each individual track by holding the shift button or the shift key. But now I have the whole entire drum kit in one single track. This right here is a limiter, and essentially what it's doing, it's maintaining the overall level of the entire track. So now right here I am sending the signal of auxiliary 1 into another auxiliary. So now you can hear that the drums are much more louder, and that's because I've doubled the signal. So now I have two auxiliary tracks. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do parallel compression. And parallel compression is what is going to allow me to make the drum kit sound even bigger than it already does. So what the compressor itself is doing, it is boosting up the dynamics of the entire drum kit. Just to add some extra volume and girth. So now I'm going to bring up the fader of the secondary auxiliary to where I feel it is the most heavy sounding. And now the drums are even louder than before. So as you can see, the limiter is used to prevent the whole entire track from spiking. You can see now that it went up to the red zone. And with the limiter on, we are safe from clipping or distorting. Now what I'm doing here is I am panning the individual drums from either left or right, just to give the whole entire drum kit a much more three-dimensional presence. So I'm panning the toms from left to right, not all the way, but very little. The floor tom a little bit more to the left, and the overheads are panned dead from left to right, like all the way, because the overheads are placed from left to right. So now I'm going to do some automation here. And I'm simply just automating parts of whichever individual piece I feel sounds a little bit weaker. So for example, the double kick runs. Whenever I play double kick runs, they sound much more weaker. So I have this section automated right here, and pay attention to this fader. You see how the fader is moving up and down by itself? Essentially, that's what it's doing. It is bringing up the double kick run, just so that the double kicks can cut through the mix a lot more. Because if I don't, then you won't hear that much of the double kick drums. The same thing goes to the snare when the snare rolls are coming up, especially in the first beginning of the song. And I mean, doing rolls with such power takes a whole lot of energy. And you can only do so much. And now we have a completely different sounding drum kit. So there you have it, folks. That's how I go on about mixing and mastering my drums, not only for this cover, but for my previous covers as well. And it's pretty fun. I enjoy it. If you guys have any other questions that you would like me to answer, whether it be a specific type of plugin, such as the compressor or the EQ, feel free to leave those questions in the comment section below, and I will answer them either via comment or even via video as well too. So I hope you guys learned something very valuable. I hope you guys found something valuable from this. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video tutorial, and I will see you guys on the next video.